Hello, my name is Isabelle Conway, and this is my performance, Blanche Ames, Communications from a Suffragist. My performance will begin now. Men always seem to have the advantages in dress, in law, in politics, everything. Will the time ever come when it will be equally easy for a woman to exist? I look upon those words my own mother, namesake, wrote in 1870, feeling hopeless for change. It's 1915, and women still have not been given the right to vote. With the war raging on in Europe, there's little interest in women's suffrage. Although the movement lacks national attention, I cannot be hopeless when there is so much work to be done. I can organize another meeting of the Massachusetts Suffrage Association, or get busy on another political cartoon. Although I was not allowed to get involved in politics due to my gender, I used my pen as a tool to communicate in favor of the women's suffrage movement through political cartoons. My communications ultimately made major strides towards the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Oh, I'm sorry, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Blanche Ames. I was born in 1878 in Lowell, Massachusetts to Blanche Butler Ames and Adelbert Ames. My mother was a strong, independent thinker and believed women should not only vote, but hold office. Unlike many husbands, my father was not intimidated by my mother's point of view. My father was a Reconstruction governor in Mississippi after the Civil War. He fought for equality, specifically black suffrage. My parents encouraged all of their children to obtain a college education, even their daughters. I attended Smith College and was president of my class. I graduated in 1899, and soon after, I married my husband, Oakes Ames, making me Blanche Ames. Although we shared the same last name, he held no relation to my own family. We are equals in our marriage, as we maintain our borderland property in Easton, Massachusetts. He is a Harvard botanist professor. My art skills are able to illustrate his beloved orchids we both enjoy studying. The year is now 1915, and only a dozen states offer full voting rights to women. This state-by-state strategy seems to be the only way to obtain women's suffrage, as there has been no progress towards the passage of a federal amendment. A huge election is coming up this November, where 4 new states have women's suffrage on the ballot. I'm communicating to male voters in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and in my home state of Massachusetts to enfranchise their wives, daughters, and sisters. I have become art director of the Women's Journal and featured in Boston, America, with my cartoon, The New Cradle. In The New Cradle, it depicts a husband building a big cradle while his wife holds a baby boy and girl. My message being vote. We will make it big enough for both boy and girl. As my political cartoons are becoming more publicized, it seems to have this enraging effect on anti-suffragists, especially when they discover that the artist is a woman. In my political cartoons, I only depict women as strong, beautiful, and feminine. They try to counter my political cartoons with their own, where they depict us suffragists as being old hags or witches. Look at this one here. We Have Been Too Ladylike depicts an old, gross woman, axe in hand, broken photographs on the wall, with the Votes for Women pamphlet in her hand, standing above the man she just killed. When will anti-suffragists stop villainizing us because we desire equality? I believe society will only be improved when women have equal opportunity to justice. As long as I can remember, I never could truly see a reasonable argument against women's suffrage. They are just so trivial. One of these trivial arguments is from the former President Taft. Can you believe he attacked my last political cartoon, Meanwhile They Drown? I'd sketched a man holding a life preserver that writes, "Votes for women," while the rest of us are pictured on this dock drowning. The man is saying, when all women want it, I will throw it to them. The female anti-suffragist responds, "We don't need it." He's written a whole editorial criticizing my work in the Saturday Evening Post. He writes, "I have before me the Women's Journal and Suffrage News of June 5th, 1915, with a cartoon entitled Meanwhile They Drown. The implications from such a cartoon are so unjust to the opponents of suffrage that they ought to not aid the cause. Although I cannot aid the cause with my vote, my pen is able to communicate a strong message that I believe will give suffrage the platform to become an amendment." December 1915. The election has passed, and we have drowned. Suffrage in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts has not passed. Only 35.5% voted yes to pass the amendment, while 65.4% voted no in Massachusetts. My own cousin-in-law is celebrating this as a victory, as she is the president of the Massachusetts Association opposed to the further extension of suffrage. The newspapers have been getting quite a kick out of our slight family scuffle. Listen to this most recent article. Northeastern has real ballot war. The war in Europe may end someday, but that of the suffrage and anti-camps in Northeastern, probably never. They are right. I will be fighting tooth and nail to win this war. Gaining suffrage at the state level is failing to make any new progress. We must communicate at the federal level for the passage of an amendment. Fall, 1918. Over the past 3 years, I have drawn many more political cartoons and hosted countless events at Borderland with prominent speakers like Maud Wood Park, who is a lead lobbyist in D.C., to popularize suffrage in Massachusetts. I am now working beyond women's suffrage into birth control regulation. I have co-founded the Women's Birth Control League of Massachusetts, which is a regional chapter of Margaret Sanger's movement. After 3 years of a national push for a new amendment, President Wilson finally supports women's suffrage. The House of Representatives has endorsed an amendment, but has lost in the Senate by 2 votes. One of those votes against suffrage was from Massachusetts Senator John Weeks. He has been quoted saying, "I would not vote for the suffrage amendment if the whole state of Massachusetts urged me to do so." We must not allow him to win his upcoming re-election in November. Since I still cannot vote myself, I will be communicating with voters through advertisement campaigns, speeches, and events to make sure John Weeks does not continue to represent Massachusetts in the Senate. Unseat John Weeks. Unseat John Weeks. Get women to the next run. Unseat John Weeks. John Weeks has been unseated from the Senate. Our efforts have worked. We are one step closer to suffrage. I just want to dance around and celebrate. On June 4th, 1919, the Senate finally endorsed the new amendment. 36 states were needed to ratify the amendment. The communications from the powerful, relentless suffragist, Blanche Ames, finally paid off when Massachusetts ratified the amendment on June 25th, 1919, being the 8th state to do so. Finally, on August 26, 1920, Secretary of State Bainbridge Colby signed off on the 19th Amendment, which stated, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on the account of sex." Blanche Ames led a vibrant, well-rounded life full of art and activism. Until her death on March 2nd, 1969, she was a champion of women's rights and worked for further equality for women of all social classes. Although her diligent efforts were forgotten, as she was only noted in her obituary as Mrs. Oakes Ames, botanist's widow, with a subheading illustrated of her husband's work on orchids. Her legacy is substantial towards gender equality and still lives on today through every female voter in America. This concludes my performance.